So I'm going to ask our panelists, Lenny Resnick and Jeff Fleming, come up to the podium. Get ready with your slingshots. Thank you again, gentlemen, for coming. And it's a really cool, industry-wide perspective on seeing, where your thinking is and where you see the challenges lie, and what you'd like to see coming about from the professional and the healthcare and the regulatory community. So appreciate that. Have questions from the audience? Usually the audience is shy in the beginning, so I have to get things going. Anybody? Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Thanks. You talked about whether to app or not to app, and I think I got the impression that you all felt not to app is the better solution, or at least for you. But is it not true that an app provides finger-sized buttons, for example, for touch screens, also provides the ability to cache images that perhaps you wouldn't be able to get via a web approach? And could you comment on those aspects? I'm sure there are others as well. Plus an icon, provides you with an icon. That's the other piece of it. So if you could perhaps comment on those aspects of apps versus non-apps.
Want me to lead since I had the slide, app, not app?
Yeah.
So if you look at it, it does really, I'd say, based on the use case. So an EHR, for example, all of them have an app, right? Because that's going to be your primary login into the system. But then would you want to go to another app to look at the images associated with that case? And if you would, what is the use case there? So I'd say for the vast majority of use cases, it's non-app. For a radiologist, and specifically, now we're not maybe talking a mobile device to Dr. Hirschhorn, maybe occasional CT or something on your iPhone, but if you're doing hardcore, the 100 chests a day, 200 chests a day, you're probably going to be on a dedicated workstation with a dedicated application.
Right, but if I may understand correctly, HTML can be embedded into someone else's app.
Correct.
Whereas your app cannot be normally embedded into someone else's app. Apps are not embeddable in other apps the way they are today. An app is a world into itself, versus when you make something that's HTML based, so then you can access it via browser, or you can embed it in another app, which is just feeding that HTML feed. So that's an advantage of doing it as a non-app way, and it's embeddable, more readily embeddable. I shouldn't say more readily, it is embeddable versus the other way, it's just not. And also, look, if you just want an icon, you can make an icon to a website on a page. That's not an issue. But it brings to bear the overall overarching issue we have with interoperability all the time, which is user, patient, and exam context. We want it to be a seamless experience for the end user. Certainly don't want them to have to log in again. Certainly don't want them to have to find the patient again or to find the exam again that they're working with. They want to just work whatever in context they're working, and they want it to follow them if they want to look at reports or images. Want to follow them. So like I said, if when it's an EMR, so you're not making that EMR, you're making the imaging application, and you want to play nicely with it. And so if you non-app it, if you just HTML it, then you can embed. Versus if you make an app, that's really going to be only for your users. But am I correct? None of you actually do server-side rendering. You're all doing client-side rendering. Is that correct?
That's correct. Correct.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily? Okay, so you want to speak to that? Because that usually requires an app.
Not necessarily.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I am not the most technical person in the room, I'm sure. However, the world is really changing where, in the beginning days of, JavaScript and HTML, some things were not available, but that's changing pretty quickly. And again, it's the IT industry that we're piggybacking on as itself. So for mobile devices, we're in the no app, but all that work is done on the server. Okay, fundamentally, all that work is being done on the server. We're streaming the pixels into the
Right. What I mean to say is, okay, fair enough. Especially some of the companies that are giving 3D on a mobile phone. So it's tough to keep up with that if all you're doing is streaming pixels. You might be able to do it that way, and some do it that way.
Ultimately, you can even do both, where a combination of client and server-side rendering. Again, with changing environments now, it depends on the use case, but almost everything can be done, on a server side today.
Okay. Questions from the audience? Come on. Questions out there? No? Oh, we got one back there, Brad?
Sure. Thanks so much for your vendor-wide perspective. One of the things I'd comment on is app-to-app integration is possible. So while embedding viewer technology on mobile devices is one way to provide that integrated experience, there are technologies to allow app-to-app integration along with like a return button. So if you had an EMR app that would call for an image, you could launch a separate app, but then return back to the same place in the EMR app in the same context. One of the workflows that we see kind of emerging now is the ability to add additional content to the mobile experience as well as the broader PACS, if you will, by taking photos or non-DICOM content and uploading it back into the ecosystem of data. I'm just curious if any of you have any comments on that regard.
I'll take that because that's actually one of the things we talked about as we got ready for today was, you know, where in the use case does the mobile technology become important? And one of the areas was in the portable world of portable X-rays within the hospital. You know, taking that portable machine as well as an iPad or some other device along with you to document what you've done at the point of care, or taking it out to the community. You know, I have a cardiology background. I have a tremendous number of friends who are sonographers who are going out and doing studies at physicians' offices and being able to take images and non-DICOM images and bring them back into the system via, okay, here's a picture of the patient, and being able to incorporate some of the clinical symptoms that the patient might have and some of the clinical presentations the patient might have back to the physician who's going to be reading that sonogram at that point in time. So we did discuss that, and we think that's going to be important, being able to bring back the information. In the app or not to app, I think I would only take one slight difference, and that would be not necessarily create an app that is specific to one particular device, but an application that is specific to a class of devices, i.e. mobile devices, going back to the button sizes and ability. If we try to get down to the particular device, by the time we get it out the door, the device will no longer be sold. So I think that's really what's changing here and what's changed within our market space, and that's where we have to become much more creative in how we provide a generic technology to work across multiple different platforms at once.
That's an excellent point. Also, I want to just point out something you kind of touched on, Brad. Thank you for bringing that up because it's really, Brad's from Visage, which could just as easily be up here as everyone else. You know, it brings up an interesting point, which is they say, oh, so mobile devices, it's you know, a mobile device, it's an imaging device, right? Yeah, because of its screen? No, not necessarily. Also because of its camera, because it's also a visible light camera, so it can not only display images, it can produce images. And I was very eye-opening being at SIM last year, and you know, back in the spring. You know, Kaiser Permanente, which does a ton of imaging. Actually, you guys know that. Yeah, but you guys, you know, they opened up the door of PACS to visible light imaging, and once they open the door, they're storing more non-radiologic images in their PACS archive than radiologic images. They've got a flood of visible light images pouring in because, you know, it's pretty easy to take a picture with a camera. And they've got dermatologists and plastic surgeons. They got, you know, internal medicine docs, surgeons, everyone taking pictures of all kinds of things that they encounter during their patient encounters that they're taking pictures of pathology, whether it's, you know, on the skin or intraoperative or, you know, down your throat or up your nose or in your ear or wherever it is. You know, and they're taking these pictures and they're shoving them in. And you know, why not, you know, take a picture of a skin lesion with an iPhone? You know, if it's convenient and it's there, clearly want to make sure that it's an accurate picture, make sure the colors are right, make sure that you're not misdiagnosing. Okay, you know, there have to be some safeguards on that. But you know, but these mobile devices, they all come with cameras, and they could produce images just as much as they can display them.
And to that point, also dental. At Kaiser.
Dental,
so
sure.
We're storing the dental there as well. But the ingestion of the information, one of the quandaries that we're seeing is who really owns it? Is it going to be stored in a radiology in a VNA, some sort of hosted on-site or remote, some disaster recovery, or is it part of the EHR? So at Shriners, the CMIO at a conference I was at recently gave an example with his iPhone. There was a burn. And if a burn victim took it, and that was a lot faster from where they were, to actually get a primary, say, okay, it's second degree, third degree, do we send the child to the trauma or send them to their outpatient? So using that telemedicine, but ultimately, where is it stored? And so we are creating systems. I think most of us are creating systems that certainly will ingest that information, display the information, but then ultimately where it resides is still an unknown. Country to country, I think some countries are far more progressive as far as looking at this is for the enterprise, and we're going to have one repository for all of it. Now the question is, how do we get the data out? How do we mine it? But right now in the U.S., I still see that question of, is endoscopic, should it go into your PAC system? Pathology, do we keep it in a pathology system? Cardiology and radiology sometimes don't even play nice together probably in your experience. So I think that's part of it as well, is who's really ultimately the owner and the driver of this information? Who owns it?
And just to tease it out a little further, they also made another observation. I said, something totally unexpected. They said, when it comes to plastic surgeons, well, that's very different. They said, because those pictures are very sensitive that they're taking, and they absolutely refused to put the pictures in the general PACS because not too many people are worried about their CAT scan image getting out there. It doesn't look like you, but a picture of a person's naked body, well, they're rather sensitive about that, and the plastic surgeons don't want to lose their business by all it takes is one patient to complain that my picture got out there on the internet, that my doctor took in the office, and they absolutely refused to have that go into the general PACS, and they said, you're making a separate PACS just for plastic surgery that only the plastic surgeons have access to. Go figure. And it makes sense. I could see their apprehension. It's not just it's a different type of security issue. It's a security within the medical community. Things getting out there, but it shows how complicated this can get.
Actually, another use case that we found somewhat similar to the plastic surgery is also with child abuse cases. Also, you want to really try to restrict access to those types of visible light images as well. And that's why we are seeing a trend, as others are seeing it, for more of a central repository than just putting those images in radiology PACS. There are a lot of other issues that radiology hasn't really had to think about because, again, they are just CAT scans in there. So yes, that is another trend.
There they come. It's like popcorn. Then they start popping. Okay, go ahead. Get him a microphone. There you go. There you go. Over here.
I was going to point out a couple challenges about the whole mobile devices within the institutions. That's something I think industry should think about too. Not just the software developers, also the hardware manufacturers. Because one, for example, in the case of iPad and their derivatives, if you guys realize this is like lightweight device, which lasts the battery like 10, 14 hours, okay? But in order to do that, they really dim the radio signal. The transmitter on it is not the strongest because it has to last.
Right.
Also, nice casing, but aluminum. That means you're going to lose some signal on that device. Now, imagine yourself walking in a corridor in a hospital with this device, okay? When you change your, from one router to another wireless router, you may not get the reception you were expecting you're going to be getting as you're traveling. Two, like security issues. Let's say, am I going to be pulling all the images I'm looking into this device? If the answer is yes, one, how much traffic are you going to create by doing that? If you're every resident, like thousands of them are doing the same thing at the same time, how are you going to stress your environment? Are they going to keep those images on those devices? What's going to happen if someone loses that image? It's patient's data. It's a HIPAA security issue. They cannot just walk out of the institution with that device in their hands and put it on a coffee table on a Starbucks. Three, let's say you're going with a route with, okay, I'm not gonna allow any images to be stored on the device. One, it's a memory issue. You can only store so much. Two, let's say I'm gonna stream it now. Well, what kind of streaming technology are you gonna allow on this device? That means if you're streaming it, you're rendering it somewhere in a server farm. What kind of technology are you gonna put in place to render those images on the fly as thousands of people are looking? From a perspective like medical center IT department, those questions are not a question you can answer like in a second or you can solve in a second. There are like a lot of technological boundaries you have to cross if you're willing to go to the next step of cool or like very nice, you know. So those are, I think, some of the questions or like problems I would like to raise. I'm not trying to downplay. No. Just like those are like real issues in the real world. It's nice to have these capabilities, but there are issues coming along with them.
Okay, I'm gonna preempt a little bit because some of these guys are chomping at the bit. They've got some of this stuff well worked out. Okay, I think most of this is well worked out.
Right.
In terms of server load balancing stuff like that, it's well worked out. Like they know their models, they know what to expect. They do know on a user base how to serve stuff out to not get overwhelmed. To have enough and make sure they have enough gun power, basically, on the server farm. Whether it's in a virtualized environment or whatever, they know how many concurrent users they're going to have, how much they're going to pull, how to pull out the streams using Watto, whatever they're going to do, pull this stuff out. I got to tell you, I know these guys. Okay. That part has pretty much been solved. And if you have a problem in institutions, it's because you have someone who doesn't know what they're doing, configuring it improperly. But there's plenty of gun power, from the server farms that these guys set up in order to serve those thousands of users. They're already doing it with the desktops, doing it with the mobile devices. It's not that different in terms of trying to keep up with the number of users accessing it. It's just a question of how they're accessing it. Also, just in terms of the wireless coverage, yeah, I mean, look, my hospital originally told me, they said, well, we're only going to have wireless coverage in a part of the hospital. Then a few months later, I asked them about it, and they said, oh, no, forget that. No, it's going the entire hospital. We're having wireless access points every 5 feet and whatever, and it's just not going to be an issue inside. In terms of the security, and I'll let you guys respond to this as well, but in terms of security, I was actually found it was annoying and also humorous when I put my phone in my pocket and a new pair of shorts, or just a pair of shorts, and normally put them in, and it must have falsely tried to authenticate 10 times because the device said, you now have to put in the recovery code. And I'm like, what's that? And so I didn't know what it was. I tried to put in my password, which it was not my regular password, and it says, I am going to wipe my device. And so what did it wipe? It wiped all the apps and left all my data intact. Because my data was on the SD card, which it doesn't touch. So I said, gee, that's great. But it's also bad because it shows if I put any medical images there, that whole security mechanism completely was useless. Because anything I stored in the SD card, it didn't touch. It says, well, that's not mine. That's the SD cards. But I can also tell you that in general, these applications, they don't store a whole entire image set. As any good design, they basically try to only download what you're going to see. And generally speaking, they're just going to try to keep up with what you're looking at. And when you're not looking at it anymore, they may keep it temporarily, but as a general rule, when these apps exit, they wipe. And they don't leave anything behind. And I thought it was actually very interesting. I'm sorry, I forgot who was making the point that your laptop it tends to be more of a problem than your mobile device. Mobile device, you like cuddle and coddle. It's your wallet. You keep it with you. God forbid you don't feel it with you for 2 seconds. You're like where'd it go? That actually people tend to lose less. And if they do, I mean, hey, they're all password protected. And as a matter of fact, the institutions push down a security policy. If you want to get your email from the institution, they say, fine, we're going to push down a security policy to your device. They can't do that with your laptop. So these things actually, because generationally they came along later, tend to be more secure than this. So with that, though, I'm going to steal your thunder. Go ahead.
No, that's absolutely true. They are more secure. There's billions of dollars that the banking industry and other industries are spending on IT security than they do on laptops and mainframes. So absolutely more secure. But it does bring up hundreds of new issues. I mean, now we are talking about data encryption in transit and data encryption at rest. When we started building PACS, 20 years ago, no one thought about encrypting the data that was sitting there at the hospital site. But now that we're moving into a cloud, which is probably in a hosted data center, which is absolutely secure, people want the data encrypted. So I would contend that with mobile device, it's actually going to make us more secure in the end.
The key, too, is it's not just the departmental decision now. or just the private practice. There are other people involved in that. And for a successful outcome, you really need to walk through tactically what's the bandwidth between point A and point B, or what's the wireless connection. You know, what are we doing from security for the EMR? What's our security policy? Okay, is this part of it, or does it go above and beyond? I think a lot of times you'll find it go above and beyond, especially if it's in a hosted environment. But it's working as a partner with vendor, I'd say the clinical person, and the IT team. If somehow those are out of sync, could be the vendor. Not Carestream, but could be the vendor. But
Not
if it's one of the other two, it leads to a poor outcome.
Absolutely
I mean, I guarantee you we all have examples where the radiologist department made a decision, they loved it, never involved IT, and it didn't work the way we expected. Conversely, we've had top-down, CEO, CFO, they have a great relationship with the vendor. I came from a very large, multi-entity vendor who had a lot of top-down decisions. Radiology was never brought into decision, didn't accept it. Both were failed, not intentionally, but without having each of the parties at the table and the vendor. Final thought, hold us accountable. Put it in the contract. What's the expectation? What's the performance? What's the uptime? You know, have the teeth in the contract. Not that you ever want to go to litigation, but have it there so you are really comfortable on these are the expectations. It's not going to probably be Google. I looked at a Google search the other night for the hotel, you know, and I looked at hotels and I just put the address, came up, 700,000 hits. Now, are they all really there? I'm not really sure, but in 0.23 seconds.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to push your button.
That's okay.
like that. But I was just trying to to highlight some of the fine prints, what institutions should be looking for,
Absolutely.
because you can't just take everything for granted. Hey, this is nice device, nice demo, it's going to work for all. I was just trying to point out some of the caveats.
Yeah.
Apparently, it looks like you guys are paying attention to those things, but not everyone does. I mean, that's what I was trying to come up with.
fair.
Well, one last comment is, I think in the mobile technology, we have benefited from the consumer use of the mobile technology. You talk about streaming of video, the latest YouTube hit puts a lot more pressure on hospital bandwidth sometimes than we ever will. And so a lot of that's being worked out in advance, and that's why we're really saying that we have to figure out how we can adapt that consumer technology with the caveats of, if I lose a YouTube video, not a big deal. If I lose a medical record, much bigger deal. So we understand that, and we have to apply that, but we can benefit from what has gone in front of us. And if we try to adapt outside of that, we're going to adapt incorrectly.
And terrific. I think we have time for maybe one more question. I think we're a little bit over. Is there another question back there? We have 2 more questions. Okay, well, see if we can take them quick. I don't want to.
Is there anything that pits us against each other?
There you go. So which one of you guys is best? Sorry.
Well, how about this one? I think it's more of a comment, but with a question buried somewhere within. But with all the regulations and megapixels and everything aside, isn't some of it left up to the judgment of the radiologist or care provider as far as the environment? You mentioned Starbucks, and Starbucks is a great place. I don't think they meet my environment requirements as far as lighting, and I don't do it at the beach because the sand gets in the keyboard and I think it's too bright, and I don't think that's a good place to do it. In fact, it reminds me of a radiology cartoon I saw once where 2 guys at the baseball game where one guy was a neuroradiologist and was called, and he was the only one, and he said, okay, I think it's a subdural hematoma, and can you pass me another brewski? And I thought that was pretty
I think I hit on the head with a ball and then developed a subdural hematoma.
Yeah, just add to it. But I was just wondering your thoughts on the judgment of the environment, and say a person has a 1K monitor that they got that's a reasonable size and luminance, and they're reading CTs and they're comfortable. Do you recommend that they get every monitor they're looking at checked?
Well, look, you're talking about occasional consultation, and I'm going to say really what I'd like to see is for there to be a visual test to say, hey, look, you don't know if it's calibrated or if it's not calibrated, you're not sure. Just because something wasn't calibrated doesn't mean that it's not conformant. It probably isn't, or it might not be, but you don't know. It's just, it could be the natural gamma is close enough to the DICOM curve. Bottom line is, that what ideally they should do is just do a visual test, to say, hey, look, doc, here, I'm gonna, within 30 seconds, I'm gonna show you a couple of targets. Can you see them? If you can, you're fine. And then that takes into account everything that's around, and it's just simply the ability to know, because the problem here is that you don't see what you don't see. You don't know what you're not seeing. And if you did, then it wouldn't be a problem. But here, that's the nature of the issue. It's like raise your hand if you're not here. So to having some kind of simple visual test, to say, hey, can you see this, doctor? Then it takes into account the monitor, the lighting conditions, your glasses, how old your prescription is, and all those factors. And it says, hey, if you can see it, then it's fine. Now, does that mean that you're not at liberty to take your simple monitor at your friend's house where you are at the time and try to look at things? No, you are. Just recognize that you're taking a risk when you do that. You don't have any external confirmation that what you're doing is okay. You are exercising your judgment, but you will be held accountable for doing so. And it's wiser if you have some kind of external confirmation to say, look, I took some industry standard steps to make sure that I was seeing everything I was supposed to be seeing at the time. Frankly, though, on a CAT scan, it's very unlikely you're going to miss something if you window a level the way you always do and go through it. It's really unlikely unless the display is really bad, in which case you'll be able to see it. So practically speaking, that's probably the way it's going to be. But you are taking a risk when you do that. So as an individual, you're free to practice medicine as you so choose. You'll be held accountable as you do so by the State Departments of Health, not the FDA. But when you're setting policy for a department or for a hospital, then how you want your doctors, your radiologists to read things remotely, I would rather not set a policy of saying let each one do what is straight in his eyes, Kol Yesher B'einav, whatever is normal for him to see. I'd rather it set a policy of saying you're going to use this for 30 seconds or whatever it is on this occasional basis. You're going to do some kind of visual check first, so that which will be logged centrally in a system to say that when Dr. So-and-so looked at patient so-and-so, she or he did this test first and confirmed that their monitor was conform when they did it, and then you'll be on more firm ground if, God forbid, there's a lawsuit or there's some problem later.
So the regulatory and whatever you can do, say bringing a monitor into your folks and having it tested, or at least go through the specs. And in addition, I think too, you mentioned pneumothorax. That's a good one that I like to use to see when I'm up in ICU and I'm using their monitors that, it might be on someone's desktop that they're asking me about. But
right. So in such a case, I would say with enough window and leveling, you really can probably overcome the fact that it's not as bright and not calibrated. You probably can if you window and level enough. It's not quite the same, but it'll take you longer, but you probably will be able to. But if you want to be on firmer ground and say officially yes or no, so go to something that's conform, that's calibrated. So I think we have one last question there, and then we're going to take a break. We have one last question somewhere over there. No, okay. All right. I think we're going to take a 10-minute break. So it's now whatever time it is now.
3.
My watch is off a little bit. 3 o'clock. So 3:10 we'll resume.
Thank you.
Thanks.